Go like this, just in case. Love it.
Welcome to Dynasty Life. I'm Theo Gremminger. Redraft ends, but Dynasty is life. And we love this time of year, Alan Seslowsky, because it's like all year long when you're in Dynasty football, you're always kind of thinking about rookie drafts. You're thinking about this upcoming class. Even if you're not somebody who dives extensively into like rookie pick values, you want to kind of understand like Marvin Harrison Jr.'s, the Malik Neighbors, so you understand like what your rookie draft picks are worth. But this time of year, it's like everyone off the streets is into Dynasty football because of the NFL draft and all these moves. I'm having multiple people coming up to me like on Long Island being like, yo, did you see the Stefon Diggs trade? And I'm like, yeah, I saw the Stefon Diggs trade. I'm about this life, man. I'm talking about it every day with guys like Alan Seslowsky. But Alan, you're one of my favorite people to record with. I don't need to give you some big preamble.
I don't like preambles. Not into preambles.
we don't like the non-introductions
yeah.
on Dynasty Trades in 5, but we do intros here on Dynasty Life. So I got to give a little intro. Alan is my co-host on the Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast with Matt Kelly, the Podfather. So Alan and I record, weekly this time of year, but I still wanted to get you in for one of these on Dynasty Life. You've been on Dynasty Life several times now, but I'm doing these series of rankings where I first had Jax Falcone of the undrafted and the undroppables, and we did an overall like Dynasty startup rankings, essentially your Dynasty rankings. Then I had Ian Miller. We did quarterbacks. I had Dan Williamson. We did tight ends. It's a little bit of a change of pace from the constant rookie talk, although we are going to rank some rookies and we're going to be ranking them highly today. But Alan, this is going to be very cool. We're going to do our collective wide receiver rankings. But first, I got to get into it with you, man. How are you doing this time of year? Are you just getting so hyped up for this NFL draft?
Well, you said something when you opened the show that I want to actually just underline, that the reason why I think a lot of content creators like this time of year and why content consumers like this time of year better, because there's hope. It's like why bad teams like the NFL draft, Theo, right? Because you can only see the upside. It hasn't, when you pick 7th last year in your rookie draft and you took Quentin Johnson, you're only seeing the upside. He's on the Chargers with Justin Herbert. The reality of them that you picked a horrible pick hasn't actually kicked in yet. Right. So that's what's so good about the offseason, that every team on paper looks hopeful. You're doing new it's spring. It's a time of blooming. And that's why I think we enjoy this also. Whereas there's a little bit of monotony and realization that great team you drafted in week 3 is already 0-3 with no hope and 4 or 5 injuries.
Every Dynasty roster should look good this time of year because you're either staring at rookie picks or you're staring at like really good players on paper. But as we know, things change. We talked about like at length the effects of the Stefon Diggs trade. Mm-hmm. We talked about this on Sonic Truth, and I'm sure you've talked about it on several podcasts. But interesting to kind of come back a week later and talk values. One player that I don't think has been talked about enough recently is Tank Dell. Just curious kind of how you're valuing him right now in Dynasty. We're going to talk about the rankings, kind of see where he ends up. But this was a guy that peaked, then took a step back with Nico Collins's, sort of run. We saw Tank Dell being drafted as wide receiver 19 on Underdog. Nico Collins moved up to wide receiver 9. Now Stefon Diggs is in the mix. Like Tank Dell's an interesting one because the sample size is so small, but the production is so impressive. What's kind of your take right now on Tank Dell? Is he a guy you're looking to add to your Dynasty rosters? Neutral? How are you feeling it, Alan?
I think how you felt about Tank Dell before the trade shouldn't change too much, Theo. I think what happens is Tank Dell becomes a little more week-to-week volatile, but I think at the end of the season, you're still going to see the same numbers, right? Like very Deshaun Jackson from like a decade ago, where you just put him in every week. You still get him as a second wide receiver in any format, and you're going to take the good with the bad. If he comes out and has a decent week 1, a down week 2, you're not even thinking about benching a player like Tank Dell because the 6 catches for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns is always there. It's, so that puts him well inside like the circle of trust cut line. I mean, think about this. Like if you have a wide receiver like Christian Watson or Calvin Ridley, and they come out in week 1 and do 3 for 38, you're starting to question, like, can I even play that guy in week 2, right? So I think as far as like ranking Tank Dell, whether he's wide receiver 17 or wide receiver 24, it almost doesn't matter. He's going to be solidly inside your circle of trust for at least the first month of the season. So I don't think it changes his ranking that much. It could change his week to week production, a little more volatile in my judgment.
Yeah, and I love that you bring up the volatility, but when we have volatile players, we love spike weeks, and Tank Dell showed us the ability to hit massive spike weeks. I believe he had 2 wide receiver 1 overall finishes on a weekly finish last year. And he had like 4 games over 25 points scored. So Tank Dell went nuts last year. And there's the whole argument that the pie could grow larger, but I think he's one that people are really struggling with on the values. I'll give you an on the clock.
Can you stick with Dell before you give me the on the clock?
Oh yeah.
Wasn't, take a walk down Narrative Street. Wasn't Dell one of the guys that supposedly CJ Stroud was pounding the table for? Like, hey, you better get this guy for me, right? That's not going to change because Stefon Diggs comes in the door. Like, he's not going to be like, all right, Tank Dell, I yelled at our management guy, got you in the door, but now we have another guy, so you're just out. So I think that if you combine that narrative, what we actually saw from them last year, Tank Dell, I saw his dynasty like market dropped a few spots, but the confidence should not, for reasons we already outlined. Go ahead. What's your either or?
They had the hotel parking lot narrative last year where Stroud
very
and
strong.
Dell
very
were
strong.
like throwing the football around in the parking lot right after they were drafted. I thought that was very cool. And yeah, I agree with you. The whole, like, if this is your guy, it's not going to change. It's certainly more of a long-term thinking. And Stroud showed it last year. Like, he targeted Tank Dell, like again, the spike weeks. But I'll give you an on the clock one.
Mm-hmm.
T. Higgins or Tank Dell on your dynasty roster?
Yeah, it's like the perfect one, right? Like I think Tank Dell, because he's going to be on this team attached to this quarterback for the next 3 to 5 years minimum, could be more. T. Higgins, it seems kind of obvious that next year he's going to be out in the wilderness, and we don't know where he's going to be. He could be attached to a bad quarterback, and all of a sudden we're looking at a good player like T. Higgins, similar to like Terry McLaurin, where he's always attached to a poor quarterback, never hit expectations. So just based on, like, if we're playing dynasty fantasy football, we always talk about, we want to have a little bit of a shorter term view, but that shorter term view could be like 2 to 3 years, right, Theo? So I think just since there's such similar outlook for production, I think you have to go into the team context confidence. So that's Tank Dell.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. I would say that the Tank Dell trade market, that's something I would look to dive into kind of now before people see how the chips fall. All it's going to take is a little bit of positive, training camp buzz this summer. You're going to see, kind of the values settle in. But I think right now Tank Dell is a value for some of these buy low trade offers.
Can I give you one? An either or?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So right now, Tank Dell or JSN and whoever RB3 ends up being in this class. So Tank Dell or JSN plus, like, I'm going to say pick 2.3, but say that ends up being RB3.
I'm probably going to take the package.
Yeah.
Because I think the package is going to be, I actually think RB3 in this class could be more valuable than a lot of people are like, kind of accepting. And I think at the end of the day, it's sort of like saying to me, Alan, in a single QB league, would you rather have Tank Dell or JSN and like the 202?
Yeah, that's 202. It's going to be the same thing, because after the 4 quarterbacks, I mean, yes, it's all like a range, right? 2.3, 2.6, whatever it is. So, but my point is that you think that JSN and Tank Dell are not that dissimilar, that you immediately went to, hey, give me the extra asset. Whereas there's a lot of, there's people that play dynasty fantasy football that think these guys aren't even like in the same stratosphere at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's an argument to be said for the safer thing to do in dynasty sometimes is to take the player that you've already seen produce at a very high level. But I do still have optimism for JSN. I'll say it's cautious optimism. Like, if somebody offered me a big enough package, I think I'd take it. But when you present JSN on like a trade where I'd be getting JSN plus an asset that I like. Like I think getting the 202 in a rookie draft is not just like a throw on type. It's not like
a first round pick.
It's not a random second. And like last year, that 202 in single QB leagues, again, not every league is not every season is going to be the same. But I believe in my ability to kind of extract value, because you always see those first round guys, a couple of first rounders bust, and then a couple of early second rounders succeed. Last year, we saw Devon Achane go in that range. Sam Laporta in a lot of FFPC leagues was in that range. There was multiple players that kind of would have helped you out of that range. So I'm going to take my chances, Alan, out in the streets. But I got to ask you a question. It's sort of become an evergreen question for me in all of my pods, and I sometimes give you credit for it. Sometimes I don't. But I stole this question off of you.
You could have it, Theo. You could have it. It's your question now. You no longer have to attribute it. You no longer have to attribute it. This is me officially on paper, on a podcast, saying whatever this question is, if you've given me credit, it is now your question.
If you are a lawyer in the chat, please comment and let us know that you acknowledge Alan's verbal contract with me. But Alan, I've asked everybody this on press coverage. I ask everybody this on Dynasty Life and First Class Fantasy. We don't really record as often lately, but people are getting this question as well. And this is sort of a question we were asking people last summer, kind of in a redraft context, but it really, really works in Dynasty as well. If you could know the final stats of any single player in 2024, who would it be?
Oh, this is such an easy one for me. It's Drake London, right? Because he has been earmarked as the most likely guy to go from the, hey, he's been pretty good, to the elite tier, right? Like you can lay out a case so obviously that Drake London is now part of that big three receivers, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase next year, or he could be like wide receiver 22. I mean, I don't even think he's even finished that high in seasonal output, but if I can know, because right now Drake London in our dynasty, in the dynasty market is ranked as a top 12 wide receiver. You can actually get wide receiver 12, prices for him, meaning I could add a first round pick to Drake London and probably get up to Amon-Ra St. Brown easily, right? Like that's a trade that can happen. But if I knew that Drake London once again finished as wide receiver 38, I would obviously be on the other side of that trade. So London is the guy that has optimism, that hasn't done it yet. Show me the cheat code. Show me the week 17 numbers on him. And man, am I going to be profitable in my leagues this year, Theo.
I'm very bullish on Drake London as well, but there's an argument that this is peak Drake London trade value, because right now he's being treated like a top 10 wide receiver, top 8 wide receiver in Dynasty because of the optimism. And I share it with you. I think he's going to do very well this year, but if you're going to cash out on Drake London right now, I'll give you an OTC.
But wait, just before you give that OTC, do you agree if you could peel back the sticker and see the numbers, that's like an actual cheat code?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Even though he has steamed up, like on Underdog right now, if you're drafting Drake London, you're having to use that early second. So I don't know how much peak we're talking about here.
It's but like, if you pull back the sticker and you saw he's wide receiver 40 on the year, he's someone that you could sell and profit on. That was the point of your question, I'm assuming, is that, hey, it doesn't just mean like, hey, I peel it back and I see he's good. I could peel it back and see he's bad and profit. I could be selling lemons out there right now.
100%. I think he's definitely a really, really fun one when you try to think of like, as a buy or a sell. But I do think it's going to be really fun with Kirk Cousins there, and I think the offense is going to score a lot of points. So,
do you have one? Do you have a peel back the sticker and see the stats before anyone else does?
It's Caleb Williams for me, because I think Caleb Williams, the market's sort of corrected itself. Where, Alan, we're seeing him in dynasty startups as like right around that QB8 range, where it's like an argument for Justin Herbert or Caleb Williams. He's sort of gone ahead of Kyler Murray, behind that Joe Burrow tier. But I think for Dynasty, when you look at Caleb Williams, I think he's going to be a truly elite special talent. And in single QB leagues, I think he might be the 105. And it's hard for me to it's always hard for me to pull the trigger on a quarterback in a single QB format, because I always feel like I'm going to be able to outsmart it. But at the end of the day, you might be getting a guy who could put up multiple QB1 overall in his career type seasons. And I also think it's interesting for me from like a redraft and best ball perspective, because Caleb Williams, the market has corrected itself. He's going as quarterback 12, but I still feel like, and that's improved because it was like quarterback 16, and now it's like the slow drip of knowing the situation, being excited about his weapons in Chicago. But now it's like a quarterback 12. I'm like, I still think he has big upside from there. We
Yeah,
saw
well,
like, yeah,
there's no downside in single quarterback of reaching on a quarterback because you can always get Matt Stafford on the waiver wire, right? You can always get Tua in round 11. So I'm all for reaching. If you have a feeling or, just you've analyzed the situation and you think Caleb Williams can be like break fantasy, like reach for him at QB 12. There's no downside.
yeah, no, I'm with you, and especially like in best ball or dynasty best ball for that matter, like having that upside quarterback weeks, it's like a week winner, isn't it, Alex? Alan, I think that what's interesting is 29. I'll ask you this one: 29 touchdowns is the record for a Chicago Bears quarterback. Like no one's ever gone to 30 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
Does Caleb Williams hit that in his first year?
If there's someone that has a chance to, it's him, but I'm going to say under. I'm just going to play historicals here. And you said any quarterback is 20. Who had the 29? Jay Cutler?
No, I don't think it was Cutler. I'd have to pull that one up. I think
It's
it
like
was
Rex Grossman. Rex.
You know what? When we're at the commercial break, I'm gonna
Yeah.
pull that one up because I saw it, but I'm like, now
Under.
I can't picture it. Yeah.
Because a lot of these guys, the rookies, like they don't put a lot on their plate. It's very rare they come out and do a CJ Stroud, right? A lot of even like Peyton Manning like wasn't good in year one. I think it's very possible you see like 16 touchdowns, like 7 interceptions, but you saw flashes of goodness here. Now, I'll take the under on that's a high number. 30 is great for like a good experienced quarterback. Now, so I would take the under. But Caleb can get up to that QB5, even if he has, maybe a couple rushing touchdowns added on there and just looks good. He can get there. Similar to Anthony Richardson, who's QB7, 8, or 9, and he, played 4 games.
But a couple of them were really, really good.
Yeah, nuclear games. They were difference making. They were RG3 rookie year style games.
So when we're talking about the wide receiver position, a lot kind of changes over the years. But when we go back and kind of look at things, a lot of dynasty managers will point to age as a time that a player can peak and a time that we want to kind of get away from them as a dynasty asset. Do you adhere to age apex like formulas or target numbers? Is there a certain age where you're looking to get out of a player, or is it case to case basis?
Yeah, it's mostly case to case. I don't have like a number because would you really say your number was 27? You weren't getting out of Tyreek Hill at age 27. You're like, dude, this is like how I'm going to win for the next 3 years, 4 years. Antonio Brown, once he hit his stride, right? About 7, 8 years ago, you're like, it didn't matter what age they are. Now, of course, if you're like on Chris Godwin or Terry McLaurin and they're age 27, even someone's a little sexier like DK Metcalf, he's a player that we've been discussing now. He's age 26. And I used to make fun of, the analysis that sell DK Metcalf, but if he has a down season a year from now, it's going to be difficult to get him. And if you like, rookie 109, like you might seem like an overpay to give DK Metcalf a rookie 109. So it is player to player, but the greats, man, they seem to age well. Look at the difference, Theo, and this as a good tool to use in Dynasty is look at the redraft rankings, look at the Dynasty rankings, see where the biggest disparities are, and there's your values. The Mike Evans, Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, they all go multiple rounds ahead in redraft than they do in Dynasty. So those guys, I'm just going to ride them out. Keenan Allen, it's DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver 62. Now, he's the one that's like almost people are saying he's done because he'll probably be 32 or 33 when the season starts. So answering your question, Rick, I don't worry about the age. I pay attention to it, but it's not an absolute barometer for me.
Yeah, and Randy Moss and Marvin Harrison both had their career high seasons in terms of scoring at 30 years old.
How do you explain that? Like how come? They're supposed to go past their athletic peak at age 28. Why did the all-time greats have their best seasons then?
I think they retain their elite athleticism. I think they're like different kinds of athletes. Both of those guys were extremely athletic in their own way. And they were both very technically gifted. And I think it's more like the game slows down and it's like a perfect storm for them where they're also had the incredible quarterback play that they were associated with in both of those seasons. It was Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. at kind of like peak Brady, peak Manning. So for me, it was like really a perfect storm. Again, I was younger, so I wasn't like studying the game, but it was more like watching a guy play and saying, "Oh my gosh, this guy is unbelievable." But I think it was more of a guys didn't break out as early back then
Right.
as well, and I think
Not
that
the
you
years, it's the
yeah.
miles in a sense, right? Like their mileage wasn't as high. But you said something really important there. I don't want you just to skip over it. It's like they know the game better. They're like, you ever go play pickup basketball, Theo, and there's like some old dude there that's just scoring at will, getting every rebound, old man game, so to speak.
Oh yeah.
It's the same reason like why MMA fighters, the greats I'm talking about. I'm not talking about like your middle of the road guys, like the elite guys, the Randy Couture's, the Chuck Liddells. They have some of their best years in their high 30s because it's whatever they've lost in athleticism, they've gained in technique and knowledge and understanding of the game. So I think that's why the all-timers, you can't just say age 27. Sometimes it's like age 32, 33. And Mike Taglieri, the guy who used to be at Fantasy Pros before he tragically passed away a few years ago, he put out either an article or study or something that said that these guys, the all-time greats, like the amazing greats, don't fall off at age 31 like we all think. It's age 33. Julio Jones is a great example. He didn't fall off the cliff like where he was terrible till age 33. And again, I'd have to look up that piece to see exactly, but I do remember thinking that, like, same thing with the all-time tight ends, right? The Kelseys, the Gates, and all those guys. They seem to have a little bit more longevity, and it could be old man game, like you explained.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting concept. But getting back to the older wide receivers,
Yeah.
who is your favorite? You mentioned a bunch of guys, but who is your specific favorite older wide receiver to go out and target right now?
I mean, Tyreek Hill is the obvious answer, but if I can be a little sneakier than that, because Tyreek Hill he is, we jokingly use the term a lot, like league winner, week winner, like he actually is, right? He fell off a little bit at the end of last year, but I still think that the dynasty market is undervaluing Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams, right? And the proof of that, and Mike Evans would be another one. Sorry, just to, spray paint names all over the wall here, but that trick of using the redraft rankings, looking where the immediate market is valuing them versus where they're going, there's still value there. I mean, we're assuming because Puka Nacua ascended last year that he's going to be the best, the most productive on that team next year. It is so easy to see if Cooper Kupp has a healthy season that he's that guy. So if I was to zero in on one, I think you can get Cooper Kupp at this point for like pick 1.12. Like if you're a rookie pick 112, I think you could trade that straight up for Cooper Kupp. That was not the case 18 months ago.
You can absolutely get Cooper Kupp for that. But what I think is interesting is a guy who had sort of a dynasty correction. You mentioned Mike Evans. Like Mike Evans last year was fantastic with Baker Mayfield. Leads the NFL in touchdown receptions. Saw his targets at the highest level that he's had in, I think it was like at least 3 years. And Mike Evans is now wide receiver 18 on Underdog. And Alan, you bring up like the 112. Like there's still people that are going to get out of Mike Evans for the 112 because of his age, simply because of his age. But he also has the contract insulation. So you're going to get 2 really solid years out of him. How about just forget age? Which wide receiver right now, and you've been doing dynasty trades, you've been doing dynasty startups, and you're probably discussing dynasty 7 days a week at this time of year. Which wide receiver is the most underrated asset in dynasty right now?
Oh man, it's not just rookie. You're talking about like all wide receivers.
Anyone.
Yeah, it's just to say it one more time. It's whoever the wide receiver that's going higher in redraft and lower in dynasty. And I think it's those age guys. Well, Tyreek Hill still goes in like pretty high, but I think, not to keep hammering the same guys, but it's, maybe like Amari Cooper is a good example, right? He's going to be 30 years old this year. I mean, he's wide receiver 37 in the dynasty market. And I mean, it's probably reasonable to say he could finish as wide receiver 12 overall. And it's not a sexy name. So he's been the player where I've been offering second round rookie picks and getting him, right? And nobody's like, people are happy to get out from him. I mean, Deshaun, he produced pretty well with Joe Flacco. And, when Deshaun Watson was there, was starting to come on a little bit. I know no one likes Watson, but I think I like the boring guys who produce. In the past, Theo, it used to be guys like Tyler Lockett, right? Those are the type of players I was targeting for second round picks. I think Amari Cooper is the most underrated. Now, if you want a little bit of a sexier name, I think that you can Jameson Williams, right? Because not that he's had this big blow up, but right now, I mean, on the Sonic Truth podcast, you had Podfather jokingly, but not jokingly, said that he would trade Jameson Williams for, do you remember the name he said?
Dylan Lobb. And I was like, you get a little more than that. He's like, no, that's the take. That's the take. That's the take.
But I bet you could actually get that done with Podfather. I bet you you could do that, right? Because nobody likes Jameson Williams, but he showed up in the playoffs. And again, it was a running play. It wasn't even a passing play. But you can tell yourself the story where Jameson Williams is a top 20 wide receiver, that he has those big Will Fuller weak tilting weeks. So I would say Jameson Williams is undervalued in my judgment. And then, of course, I already gave you the Amari Cooper one. Who do you think? Because I always like picking your brains on this one. Who should I be targeting? Who's a little undervalued right now?
Michael Pittman Jr.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. He's not as cheap as Amari Cooper or certainly Jameson Williams, but he gave us a 156 target, 109 catch, over 1,100 yards receiving. He only had 4 touchdown catches. I think that the touchdown upside is there because I think the offense is going to go nuclear. And I understand that he might not get 150 targets with Anthony Richardson, but he's not disappearing. He's going to get 140 plus. This is a 26-year-old who is like a technician. He's a big, basically a really, really good big possession wide receiver that has, a couple big plays mixed in. But Michael Pittman Jr. is like that kind of guy that we talk about, these wide receivers who are going to get better with age. Like I could see Michael Pittman Jr. just having like a couple of unguardable seasons. I think that this is the year that he breaks through as a wide receiver one.
All right,
right now, go ahead.
Let's talk about it. So in the dynasty market, like someone like Roma Dunze and Brandon Ayuk, those guys are right on the fringe of the top 12, right? They're like 11 through 14, depending on where you look. I mean, I'm with you. I'd rather have Michael Pittman over those guys all day, and I'll even give you something a little extra to get me there.
Yeah, and I think that's the sort of thing where Michael Pittman, right now, the dynasty marketplace, those guys are going well ahead of Michael Pittman in startups.
Mm-hmm. Why?
It's sort of a little. I mean, I would probably take Roma Dunze over Michael Pittman Jr. just because I think he's got that like top 5 ceiling. Where I think Roma Dunze at the end of the day, like our best comparable for him is Justin Jefferson on player profile. Like we're really, really
sexy.
high.
That's sexy.
Yeah. All of the best comparables for the top 3 wide receivers are incredibly sexy right now. About as sexy a top 3 as you can get. But I give you the Brandon Ayuk one because Brandon Ayuk like is in a, when we look at Brandon Ayuk, like the talent is there to give you an incredible, peak ceiling season. But George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, the Christian McCaffrey, it's sort of like a very clogged target tree. Whereas Michael Pittman Jr., with respect to like Josh Downs and whoever else they draft, he is the alpha there. This is the player that 2 quarterbacks both targeted, at a very high rate last year, Anthony Richardson, and then also Gardner Minshew. And Michael Pittman Jr. has had success with other quarterbacks as well. He was Matt Ryan's preferred target. Like no matter who is the quarterback in Indy, Michael Pittman Jr. has been the preferred target. And his volume just continues to go up. So,
well, let me ask you this about Pittman. So there's been a lot of rumors that the Indianapolis Colts are trying to figure out a way to get Brock Bowers. Okay. Now we all know Brock Bowers, forget his tight end ranking. He's more or less a pass catcher, right? Forget what his positional ranking is. Would that affect your outlook on Pittman if they do secure an elite asset like Brock Bowers? Or would it just be like, hey, this is good. Now at least they have a credible second target. How do you go when you parse out something like that?
For me, I think that hurts Josh Downs a lot more than it would hurt Brock Bowers. I think Josh Downs last year, he set the record for receptions as a Colts rookie, had a really underrated season, like a low-key underrated season. But I think if Brock Bowers ends up being an Indianapolis Colt, he immediately becomes like the number 2 target. He's probably at like 100 targets. Downs is probably a little bit similar, but again, tight end versus wide receiver. And then
Pittman
Michael
stays.
Pittman he might get 140. But again, I think the efficiency of the offense, the quality of the offense would go way up. with a guy like Brock Bowers who could really challenge defenses. So Pittman's always going to be the first down guy if you're looking for a receiver. And I think
what I like
that will
about
not
Pittman
change.
too? You said something really cool about Pittman, about how he's produced with a lot of quarterbacks. That resonates with me, because this year, God forbid Anthony Richardson misses time, Joe Flacco has already proven that he has still got it, that he can still feed, and have a productive offense. So that's got to give you confidence there. If you're in a Superflex league and a 30 deep, and you have Anthony Richardson, you have to figure out a way to get Joe Flacco, right? Who might have already been dropped in the offseason. But I like that for Pittman stabilization that you said he produced with Matt Ryan and these other guys. I think that's a major takeaway that anyone listening to your podcast should really feel confident in Pittman's value. Good point.
Go trade for some Pittman. Alan and I both are cool with it. So great time to make dynasty trades, but we are not going to talk dynasty trades. We're going to talk about wide receiver rankings. And this is not going to be like Alan and I competing with one another. This is going to be our shared rankings. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to give you the top 24 dynasty wide receivers.
This episode brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy has been sponsoring Player Profiler and everything we're doing here since 2020. Sign up. Use promo code UNDERWORLD for a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. 100% instant deposit match up to $100. And you're like, oh, well, everyone's on Underdog. Not true. There's plenty of people in this audience that have not yet tried out Underdog, and it's time. They're adding more sports. They're adding more contests. Like when we're heading into NFL draft season, there's the rookies and sophomores game. When you think about way too early fantasy football, that's what Underdog is. When you think about best ball, that's what Underdog is. And if you can pick players at the end of an Underdog Fantasy best ball draft that are under rostered, that few people are picking at all, and that guy, like Kyren Williams, hits, you will likely experience positive returns. All you need is that one guy at the end who no one else is rostering, and the way to find that guy is to listen to us. UnderdogFantasy.com. The promo code is Underworld. 100% deposit match up to $100 with promo code Underworld. Underdog makes everything we do possible.
Welcome back to Dynasty Life. I'm Theo Gremminger, joined by the great Alan Seslowsky of RotoWire. Alan, and that's a wonderful Underdog segue, because when we start ranking these wide receivers, we're going to use Underdog as a tool. This worked quite well with Dan Williamson when we did tight ends, and with Ian Miller when we did quarterbacks. So I'm sure it's going to work with a pro like you.
Yeah, can you turn off the overlay so we can see the full screen? Or you don't want to? You don't have to.
How do I turn off
the overlay? So on your right on StreamYard, just go right over to the overlays, and then the Dynasty.
You want to turn off? I thought you meant something on Underdog. I know how to use the StreamYard. Yeah.
Let's
get rid of the overlay. Good call.
Yeah.
So everybody, make sure you take a note that it's Theo Gremminger and Alan Seslowsky, because
if you've made it this right, if you've made it this far, you're in on us. You're not leaving us.
So Alan, at the top of the wide receiver rankings last summer, the two of us talked about if there was a wide receiver that was going to crack the Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase tier in Dynasty, who would it be? And the two of us came up with Marvin Harrison Jr., and we were real sharp about it. But at the end of the day, CeeDee Lamb is the one who blew the doors open. And not only did CeeDee Lamb break into the top 3, but he is wide receiver 1 overall in Dynasty on a number of sites and with a number of analysts. Is he your Dynasty wide receiver 1?
Well, I was just in a Dynasty startup, and I took Jamar Chase wide receiver 1, but it was debating, right? I was debating between him and CeeDee Lamb, and the debate came down to is, do I know CeeDee Lamb will have Dak Prescott next year for sure? I don't know that. Do I know Jamar Chase will have Joe Burrow for the next 5 years? I do know that. So that's how I decided, because there's been a lot of, let's say, just rumor stuff that the Cowboys could be done with Dak Prescott if he doesn't, have a good playoff run. And then who knows if that's a rookie quarterback on Dallas? Who knows if that's a stopgap, like a Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, Sam Darnold type for a year. And CeeDee Lamb could probably transcend that. But if you're looking for tiebreakers at the top, I wanted the guy that's tethered to the elite quarterback for a half a decade. So Chase would be my number 1.
So Shane from Dynasty Trades in 5 came on here And Jamar Chase was sort of his like sneaky sell because he's a peak value guy. In his opinion, it's just you don't see the season like you saw with CeeDee Lamb out of Chase quite to
That's
that
fair.
level. The
That's
Justin
fair.
Jefferson season. So you're talking about when you put Chase at wide receiver 1 overall in your dynasty rankings, you're passing up 2 very young wide receivers who were the back-to-back wide receiver 1s. So it takes sort of a leap of faith.
Well, also those guys, I mean, other than Antonio Brown, a lot of guys don't do it in consecutive or multiple years, right? So Chase is due for this big season. If Burrow stays healthy, T. Higgins is starting to become more. I mean, he's always been a secondary part of the plan. So again, we're playing dynasty here. We're not just looking 1 year. We're looking multiple years, 2, 3 years, and it's just we don't know what what if the Vikings draft JJ McCarthy and he sucks. Right? What if CeeDee Lamb is quarterbackless or like in just kind of floating out in the ocean without a sail? So that's the only reason. All the other reasons, like if you're just doing redraft, CeeDee Lamb is the wide receiver 1 for that reason because you have him this year.
So for me, it's Justin Jefferson still wide receiver 1 in dynasty. Who's your wide receiver 2? Let's kind of try to come to a like consensus here.
Jefferson's 2.
Okay, so we'll use the averages here. So I'll have Jefferson. Let's go Jefferson at 1, and then we'll do Chase versus Lamb.
Yeah.
So why don't we talk that out? So we'll go Justin Jefferson at 1. I had him at 1. Alan had him at 2, so he becomes number 1.
There's no wrong answer here, right? I can't tell anyone why they're right or wrong. All 3 of these guys, there's no bad pick. It's like, Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes, or in past years, remember going back 2 decades, it's Larry Johnson or LaDainian Thomas. They're both great picks. There's no wrong. They're a tier. We rankings are almost, who's 1, who's 2, who's 3 doesn't matter to me. It's tier 1. Do we agree on that?
Okay. Yeah. So let's do Chase because he's your 1. Let's make him 2.
2.
And let's make CeeDee Lamb wide receiver 3. But
Perfect.
We can agree that these guys are sort of a god tier. I think wide receiver 4 and 5 are pretty clear to me. Amon-Ra St. Brown's not a guy I'm going to have to twist your arm on. Nope. He's shown it every single year. He's still young. He's got wide receiver 1 in his range of outcomes. Great offense. Do you agree that you have to keep Amon-Ra St. Brown ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr.?
I think you can make the argument that he's in the god tier, but I understand why somebody would not.
So I think wide receiver 4 and wide receiver 5 are kind of the mini god tier because of the trade equity associated with these guys. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Marvin Harrison Jr. are just worth more in Dynasty than the next few guys we're going to talk about. So I think we go ahead and lock in Marvin Harrison Jr. at wide receiver 5, unless you have trepidation and want to make a case for Nakua, AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson, whoever.
No. This is like the tier that's like holding on to the ledge of the god tier. And you can argue that each one of these guys belongs in their own tier, like you said, just based on market viability, liquidity, all that stuff, because that matters. Just production. That's the thing that Dynasty, that if anyone's new to Dynasty, which anyone listening to this show is not new to Dynasty, but it's not just the production, it's the liquidity of the asset, your ability to come in and out of it, that also adds to the value, adds to the ranking. And, I heard our mutual friend Scott say this the other day. I think intuitively I knew it, but I heard him verbalize it so well. It's like, I'm not just going to draft players I think are good. He said, I'm going to draft players that I think other people like so I can move in and out of them. I just thought that was just well said. Something I knew intuitively, but it was good to hear an expert like him talk about it.
Yeah, and I don't. Scott Connor is, I always say that he's like an influential guy, even when it comes to people who create Dynasty content. It's kind of my biggest compliment I can give to him. I don't know if I got this one from Scott. If it's somebody else, please put it in the chat. But when we talk about, I think this person said that when you look at your Dynasty roster, it's really, you don't just have 4 positions: quarterback, running back, tight end, and wide receiver, but you also have 5 because draft pick is also in there. So I'd say the draft picks are what position 5, but I think what you bring up is trade equity. I can't just have an old team with a couple of draft picks. I want to have guys that people want to trade for. I want to have sort of liquidity with my assets. So that's a whole nother, we're going to go on a 2-hour show just talking about this deep Dynasty theory, but we're only through wide receiver 5 right now.
All right, we'll do lightning round now. Lightning round.
Well, not quite lightning. I don't think we're not at lightning. We're at 39 minutes, so we're not quite lightning. Who is when it jumps out to you, like now we're talking about sort of another tier that's interesting.
Yep.
Garrett
Right, name
Wilson.
the guys.
So Garrett Wilson, Puka
Just keep
Nacua,
name
AJ
guys.
Brown.
Yeah, I would say name guys, and I'll tell you when I don't want them in the tier.
Well, I think it's for simply ranking wide receiver 6. I think it's pretty easy. I think it's has to be Wilson, AJ Brown, Puka Nacua, or I will throw in Malik Neighbors.
Or whoever, if Rome Odunze goes ahead of him and is like, if Rome Odunze goes to the Arizona Cardinals or the Chargers, and Malik Neighbors goes to just say like the Bears, right? So I don't want to like put the name there. I want to say wide receiver 2, because at time of this recording, we don't know who our wide receiver 2 is. We know who we like the best.
I think wide receiver 2 for me is Neighbors. I just think the Neighbors
No matter
is
what.
like I might be there. I love Rome Odunze. But like when we do our dynasty rankings at Player Profiler, like I have Rome Odunze closer to wide receiver 12.
Well, let me ask you
and I
this,
have
Theo.
Neighbors in this switch.
What if Neighbors goes 9th overall to the Bears and he's behind Keenan Allen and DJ Moore on the Bears with a rookie quarterback? I mean, you still going to like him above Rome Odunze if he goes to the Chargers?
I would have to look at a specific like case by case, but I wouldn't be out on Neighbors there. Yeah, I think you make a good point with that. Rome Odunze as a wide receiver 1 on the Chargers, like sort of in the immediate Keenan Allen role versus Malik Neighbors, where you're gonna have to wait a year. But I do think
maybe more.
I would say if Malik Neighbors ends up in Chicago, though, that's CeeDee Lamb as a rookie. CeeDee Lamb landed with Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. People thought he was boxed out. By the end of the year, it became evident he was the best wide receiver on the roster. Malik Neighbors, I think Keenan Allen also could be a 1-year guy in Chicago. And at the end of the day, Malik Neighbors is a stud. So if that happens, that's CeeDee Lamb 2.0.
It will take balls to take Malik Neighbors over Rome Odunze in the specific scenario that we just outlined, which, by the way, is not completely unlikely, right? What if Chicago trades up from 9 because they want Malik Neighbors, right? They go from 9 to 5. They trade with the Chargers. I mean, a lot of things can happen. That's why I said, just back to our rankings exercise, if you want to put Malik Neighbors there by name, I have no problem with it, but I just want to call it wide receiver 2 in the class, because whoever wide receiver 2 is, you will change your mind, and that's where they will go. But anyway, semantics. But I think it's actionable because people need to start. We've been doing dynasty content for months now, and we haven't even explored these alternative scenarios yet.
Okay, so you're the guest. Who is wide receiver 6?
I mean, it's Puka, right? That's who I would take. He's the most liquid. He'd prove it. Puka
is
6.
Puka more liquid than Garrett Wilson? I think they're pretty close.
Very close. I mean, at the top of the rankings, but I would say, who would you rather have? You're on the clock. You're going to want Puka, right? It's sexier. It's fun.
I might want Garrett Wilson more.
That's
but
fair.
I think they're right there with Garrett Wilson. I just get back to like the amount of targets he's receiving are similar to Puka Nacua, and I think that the talent is greater at the end of the day. I love Puka. Like, again, this is semantics. We don't need to go back and forth. Let's just do it.
One thing, actually, you make a good point here, because Garrett Wilson did it under the worst of circumstances. Puka did it under the best of circumstances. Cooper Kupp was out. The system is good. Matthew Stafford stayed healthy, right? Now, reverse those situations. What happens if Stafford goes down for the count? Cooper Kupp stays healthy. What's Puka going to be? Now you have Aaron Rodgers healthy for the whole year. What's Garrett Wilson going to be? So it's like so you make a great point that Garrett Wilson, give him the similar circumstances are optimal, and now he could vault into the elite tier.
Let's go Puka. And do we want to even talk about AJ Brown here, Alan? Or does the age and the Saquon landing in Philly kind of push him below those two younger players? Because production-wise, AJ Brown's done it 2 years in a row in Philly. Obviously, I think the Kellen Moore hire is good for him. I don't think it's a bad thing at all. He's fantastic. Where are you at on AJ?
I mean, if somebody took AJ Brown over those guys, I have no problem with it. He's still only age 27.
So why don't we do, for all intents and purposes, Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson, and then let's go
Brown.
AJ Brown for sure.
And then where are you putting on wide receiver 2? We'll call it Neighbors for now. Under those guys?
Yeah, I think Neighbors I actually might go Neighbors ahead of AJ Brown if it was just me, but I think for the the purposes of not knowing the landing spot.
Right. Wide receiver 2. That's why I said to you, we'll use Neighbors, but we'll reserve the right to change that to whoever wide receiver 2 ends up being.
So this next tier is interesting. You're talking about the Chris Olaves. You're talking about the Drake Londons. You're talking about the Rome Odunzes. And then you're talking about, the little bit older guys that are elite production types. And then sort of those fringy wide receiver ones, like and I know DJ Moore did it last year, but he's still not being valued as a top 10 wide receiver in Dynasty. I don't see most places. Brandon Ayuk. Where are you at for your next guy, Alan?
All right. I'm always win now, right? I'm always trying to win a championship, right? I'm never trying to rebuild. And if I'm rebuilding on the fly, right? So this is the difference of my Dynasty philosophy versus what you're going to hear on a lot of smarter guys than me, right? I want Tyreek Hill here, right? I want the definite bank production. Even if he retires in 2 years, like he said, go back to the beginning of this podcast when Theo, you and I were having this conversation about the elite guys tend to last a little longer. And Tyreek Hill is, I mean, that's what I would do. But for our these are our consensus rankings, right? So I think that you named all the guys that deserve to be there, except Brandon Ayuk. I don't want him there.
Okay,
whatsoever.
so forget it. So let's talk about. So it's Olave, London, Adunze, Hill,
and
yes. I'll throw DJ Moore as like the back end of that.
Sure, and your guy Pittman too.
Yeah, so I'll throw Michael Pittman Jr. kind of in the next because again, trade value matters. We value him, I think, a little bit more than the market does, and that goes for Dynasty and redraft right now. Would you agree on that a little bit?
Yeah, but I think Pittman is I think he's seen as favorable. He's seen as a top 15-ish wide receiver. You know, I mean, I've never seen him lower than like 17, 18. So I think his you know, you can trade for him. Like, I bet if you offered pick 110, 111, the person who's got Pittman's going to say no.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I think for all intents and purposes right now, the thing about Tyreek Hill is he is roster specific. If you have a team that's not winning now, Alan, your ranking for him would kind of change, correct?
Yes, but if I have him on a team, he is still, once point scoring season starts, you can still get, like, he's one of the rare guys where you can get 2 first-round picks for him as a 30-year-old wide receiver. Now, you might say, no, you can't. But if you look at one of the guys, and you can have this conversation with your league mate, hey, man, you're a top 3 team. You start big. You're a top 2 team. It's going to be pick 11 this year. It's going to be pick 9 through 12 next year. You're giving me 2 late-round picks. So I believe in September, in October, you could still get so even on a rebuild, I don't mind taking Tyreek Hill because I believe you can cash out in the first 8 weeks of the season.
So speaking of trade equity, right now, when we talk about Chris Olave, Drake London, DJ Moore, and Rome Odunze, that's sort of my next 4 people to rank. Where would you have those 4 in terms of who has the most value trade-wise?
Well, I think Rome Odunze because it's the unknown, right? And
yeah.
Let's just say he goes to the Giants, right? Just pick 6, whatever that is, right? I mean, that's like a good random spot for him. I think that anything outside of like a terrible spot, like a Odunze going to the Bears at 9, I don't think that's a good spot for him. He's going to be one of the most, until he even plays a game, he's going to be able to be traded because you're going to see all the rookie camp highlights and all that. So I think he is the most liquid and he'll have the most value.
I agree with you. And I think right now, if I have a DJ Moore team and somebody says that I can pivot to Rome Odunze, a guy who I think could have multiple top 5 seasons, sort of trading for a peak DJ Moore who now has a Keenan Allen attached to him, despite the quarterback upgrade, I might make that change just because I'm a little bit aggressive. So right now we ranked Odunze. So we're looking at DJ Moore, Chris Olave, Drake London. DJ Moore had by far the best season of the 3 last year. And he did it as the oldest one. Chris Olave has been one of these guys for like back-to-back years that's really, really flashed. And now Drake London sort of has the window. I took Drake London ahead of Chris Olave and DJ Moore in a Dynasty startup recently. So I'm Drake London here unless you want to stand for one of the other 2.
I'm pushing the like button on that.
Okay, cool. So I love that. Let's take Drake London. So now we're at DJ Moore and we're at Chris Olave, and then I'll also throw out the Ayuks and I think Michael Pittman Jr. belong in this conversation. And I'll throw out, despite the fact that he last year had somewhat of a disappointing season, but Jalen Waddle had gone over 1,000 yards for 3 straight years, top 10 NFL pick, really, really talented player. I'm going to throw him into contention right now as well.
Does Devontae Smith belong in this tier, or we're just that's not yet?
For me,
it's not yet.
I don't think so. So. For me, it's like Devonta Smith. I think he's Zay Flowers,
DK Metcalf. That's the
I think they're all sort of I think they're sort of the next. I think like
Okay.
they're behind these five guys for me, or these four guys. So
all right, here's the
which way you wanna
Waddle.
go.
Here's the case for Waddle, and then I think the other ones will kind of fall into place. The case for Waddle was he's shown that he could produce two different ways: short passing game with receptions, and he can find a way to fit into the offense by going deep. I think that Tyreek Hill, basically made Waddle the clear number 2 on the team. But anytime Tyreek Hill missed time, Waddle is easily can ascend to that role. I like that Waddle has like a nice secure floor. I don't think that while Tyreek Hill's there, he has a chance to be like top 5, but I don't think he could fall below a top 15 wide receiver. So I like in this range the safety along with the upside of Waddle.
So for me, Alan, if somebody offers you Jalen Waddle for Chris Olave, you're taking that deal.
I think that those guys are very similar, but given the team context, I would take a Waddle, correct. But I have Olave is a great player. Disappointed a little last year, and I don't like Derek Carr.
What about DJ Moore versus Waddle, or just straight up DJ Moore or Waddle?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with Waddle here again. Team, you'll hear me go back to this a lot. Team context. What if Caleb Williams is just okay, and then you add all the target competition from Keenan Allen and presumably another offensive piece. That puts it's enough of a tiebreaker at this piece right here where we know what Waddle is, and I said it in the beginning, Waddle's floor. And how about you with it? Give me the same tiebreakers: Olave, Waddle, and DJ Moore. How are you parsing those guys out? And I already know that you like Pittman on top of those guys, but so those three.
For me, I'm probably going Olave just because of the trade equity and the fact that like last year, the floor fell out. Derek Carr wasn't good. Chris Olave had a bunch of weeks that were kind of left a lot to be desired, and he still gives you like wide receiver 16 overall. And we've seen it in back-to-back seasons with him with all the metrics where, again, I took London ahead of him, but I'm prepared for a big Chris Olave year 3. This is going to be like his big year 3 breakout type season. So I'm kind of good with it. But we went Waddle, and I had him in the same tier. So why don't we just give a quick recap of what we've done so far, and then we're going to keep on drafting. Again, this is our combined wide receiver rankings. Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 1. Jamar Chase, wide receiver 2. CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 3. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Marvin Harrison Jr. take us through our top 5. Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson, and A.J. Brown and Malik Neighbors in sort of their own tier takes us to wide receiver 9. Wide receiver 10, we see our first old guy with 30-year-old Tyreek Hill. Wide receiver 11, Rome Odunze. Wide receiver 12, Drake London. Wide receiver 13, Jalen Waddle. And Alan, I am going to go in and I'm just going to put in Olave and get us to wide receiver 14.
And by the way, I have a feeling if you were on the clock, Theo, in a startup, you're not taking Tyreek Hill there. You're taking Rome Odunze.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of an ageist, even to my own detriment. And I like trading for older guys more than taking them in startups. I think that I love trading for older players when I think, you're able to kind of get a feel for the opposing managers when you're in a dynasty league for a while. And you just know the dynasty managers who want to get out from under an older wide receiver. So I like trading for those guys more than, having used that valuable dynasty startup selection. So
the problem with the Odunze, though, is if he comes out and has just like 2 bad games or 2, you're going to be like, all right, I have to wait until he goes on a streak. It's hard to erase that. Whereas Tyreek Hill, if he has 2 bad games, you're still going to be able to get full value. And again, I understand it. It's 2 different. There's multiple ways to play dynasty. It's just that when you're talking about like Tyreek Hill is Antonio Brown, right? I mean, that's basically what he is at this point, right? He's just a highly productive, quote, old guy. So go ahead.
So right now, I think that the guys in consideration, DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk, Michael Pittman Jr., and then I think it is time to discuss Devonta Smith, who I like the Kellen Moore hire for him as well. Last year, we saw Devonta Smith, the targets go down and the production go down slightly from that really, really big 2022 season. 2022, we had the contingent production where Dallas Goedert missed some time and like A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith kind of went nuclear. Devonta Smith was like neck and neck with A.J. Brown for a number of weeks. Last year, it was more like Brian Johnson had A.J. Brown continually featured. Now, was that a situation that it was the second year of A.J. Brown in the offense? Was that a situation where Devonta Smith, they just said, you know what? He's just not A.J. Brown. We want to feature A.J., gives us the best chance to win. Or was that this particular offensive coordinator didn't want to use Devonta Smith in creative ways? Maybe Kellen Moore unlocks it. Devonta Smith certainly has flashed a lot. Certainly a guy that we're really, really happy to have. But it's sort of what's the ceiling situation for me. I think this is kind of like I'd rather be really comfortable as him as my wide receiver 2 than a wide receiver 1.
Yeah, he was a smart bet heading into last year to put your chip on and say, hey, this is a guy that could really ascend into that elite tier. The bet didn't work out. Sometimes it's just even money or it's a little bit of a loss. Okay, so now we readjust, right? We saw that A.J. Brown's the clear alpha and that Devonta Smith, the case for him is that he's a good player, right? Heisman Trophy winner, comes out, belongs on the NFL field, can make big plays, but he's going to be stuck in that wide receiver 8 to 15, which, by the way, if you have him in Dynasty, you're loving that. He's every week starter. You're confident. You play him every week. But I think that, like I said, it was smart to bet on him last year. Could he make that next step? But I think we saw really what that Devonta Smith is going to be for fantasy football in this offense.
So which way do we want to go here? Devonta Smith, DJ Moore, Michael Pittman Jr., or Brandon Ayuk? Do we want to just go with Michael Pittman Jr.?
Yeah. I don't even think it's like a debate. Like he would be clearly the head of this next tier.
Yeah, so this is a situation where Alan and I really like Michael Pittman Jr. And when you talk about using the early rankings to like your benefit, we both want you to trade for Michael Pittman Jr. And right now he's wide receiver 20 on Underdog. So the market is not valuing him in redraft because I think Underdogs are really good. People say, whoa, it's best ball. But the redraft and the best ball ADPs are usually somewhat similar, especially with the drafters drafting on Underdog.
Nobody's drafting the top 30 wide receivers any different in best ball than they are in redraft. Like there's no Deshaun Jackson, Will Fuller types that you're like, oh, he's better in best ball, but not as good as like you're not even thinking like that. Your roster construction in best ball and then the end game, like the Greg Dortch types or the Marquise Brown type. Those are the guys that get moved around a little bit in best ball. Curtis Samuel. But yeah, so I think that like you said, we could use Underdog since there's so many drafts as basically the keep trade cut of redraft.
So now we're in a really, really, really good tier, but it's a difficult one to rank.
That's a lot of reallys right there.
Hey, it's really good. I'd love to have any of these 3 on my Dynasty roster. DJ Moore, who we were talking about 6 picks ago, Brandon Ayuk, Brandon Ayuk is still a heck of a player talent-wise, and he's a guy that's being treated very highly in terms of trade equity. And then Devonta Smith, who we've talked about all the merits. Of those 3 guys, if you're OTC in a Dynasty startup today, and your choices are DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk, and Devonta Smith, which way are you going? I think that's the answer.
I think that Smith, Moore, Ayuk would be how I would view these guys and how I would. But you could persuade me more ahead of Smith, but certainly Ayuk would be the third guy, just based on that he doesn't basically get used sometimes, right? Sometimes it's a Debo game. Sometimes it's a McCaffrey game. So a little bit more week-to-week consistency with those other guys, even though we just said that Devonta Smith has had some down weeks. So Smith, Moore, Ayuk would be how I would propose this.
So I would go Moore, Ayuk, Smith.
No problem with it.
We both like Moore. So that we both, and then I guess I'll go tiebreaker is I had Ayuk as 2.
Yeah. Let's go with that. That's a good.
Let's go.
You
Ayuk
persuaded me.
We'll go Smith. Yep.
Yeah, you persuaded me. That's a good one.
Okay, so get Ayuk in, and then we will go with Smith. Okay, so Alan, now we're sort of in a situation where I'll throw a few names out there.
Where are we up to? Wide receiver what?
Well, let's recap it one more time. I'll just quickly add it actually. Yeah. But I think while I'm adding it, I think the next tier, I think it's a lot of these year 2 wide receivers. You start discussing the Addisons, the Flowers. Why don't you talk about who you're leaning into?
Yeah, as far as our dynasty rankings, now you're also Nico Collins, right? I mean, he's showed that he could be like easily a top 10 dynasty wide receiver. Everybody loves the offense with CJ Stroud. I know that there's a perception here that somebody has got to fall. Is it Tank Dell? Is it Nico Collins with the addition of Stefon Diggs? And that's a very reasonable assumption. But Nico Collins, man, I mean, he took over games last year, only 25 years old. So when we talk about second-year receivers, like, the Zay Flowers and the Addisons, I think we need to include game breakers like Nico Collins, who is like a prototypical alpha with a quarterback that has already ascended to a top 2 quarterback in dynasty fantasy football.
So this is actually, I'll also throw out a few other names that we haven't discussed. George Pickens, who's heading into year 3, took a big step forward last year. T. Higgins, who a year ago, Alan, we probably would have already ranked T. Higgins. Nico Collins, you brought him up. And Deebo Samuel, who's still playing at a very, very high level, happens to be a little bit older and a guy with a perception of being beat up. We're through wide receiver 17.
Yeah, the market likes Jaden Reed. Mike Evans is still productive. Rashee Rice, up until his recent off the field stories have come out, was certainly in that mix. He still is probably. I think
so. Rice is in the mix, and then I'll throw out Tank Dell, who we talked about a little bit earlier. So
and then JSN, just for the liquidity factor, you need to throw him in there.
So right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 names. And we're only at wide receiver 17. So we're going to have to basically, I'll start eliminating guys.
No, that's...
But your
17 plus... Oh, you need 12, right? We need 7 more, right?
Yeah, we need 7 more. So we're at 17.
So let's just knock 4 guys out. Let's knock 4 guys out.
So I think for the purposes of doing this, do we knock out... Well, who's the one? JSN. Okay, so let's knock out JSN. And then do we want to knock out Rashee Rice because of the situation up in the air?
No.
Right now, I don't. Let's keep him up there.
Yeah.
So... Let's pick your text. Let's take out Deebo. That's fine.
And let's take out.
So you have Higgins, Collins, Dell. Those guys kind of one of the. Well, why don't we? You know what, Alan? Instead of doing that, let's just keep these guys in the mix. So right now we have Rashee Rice, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, the 3 sort of second-year wide receivers that stand out to me.
Pickens.
Then you have the alphas, the big outside wide receivers, the Nico Collins, George Pickens, T. Higgins. So right now we actually have, I think we've eliminated too many. I think it was a poor process on my part. But let's get these guys ranked.
Okay.
The Rashee Rice, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, or do you want to go with the outside alphas in Nico Collins, George Pickens, and T. Higgins?
Yeah, I'm very strong on the Houston wide receivers here. I would put Dell, and do we have already? Is Dell one of the guys in this?
We can include Dell because
I would have Nico and Dell would be my next 2, and again, they're just together because I can't decipher which one's going to be better for fantasy. So I'd put them both in there, and then George Pickens would be right underneath those guys. Is my proposal, but I'm open here. I'm open.
Zay Flowers, to me, I think you're kind of underrating a little bit. I think he flashed a ton last year. I think he's got dynamic ability. I could see him taking a really big step forward this season.
Take him over the Houston receivers?
I think I might right now because of where is Zay on the Underdog
in
rankings?
Dynasty? Well, in Dynasty right now, Zay Flowers is wide receiver 21, and Nico is 19, and Tank Dell is 24. So he's actually sandwiched Zay Flowers between the 2 Houston receivers. So maybe we should mirror that. And if we can't decide if he's under or over them, let's make a flower sandwich out of the Houston receivers.
So then you're going Nico Collins as your preferred Houston wide receiver, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go ahead and lock in Nico Collins. And actually, Alan, the correction on Underdog, he only goes from wide receiver 9 to wide receiver 13. So I think the market is still very, very bullish and kind of shares your enthusiasm. So Nico Collins, and then I am sort of standing for Zay Flowers, who's a guy that I think is going to take a big step forward this year. And I'm actually OTC in a slow dynasty startup, and it's a wide receiver is going to be my pick. And I was kind of between Flowers and Pickens. I still haven't put the pick in, but I think it's Flowers for me. It's sort of the OTC tells us the truth. And I will throw out DK Metcalf as another name we haven't ranked yet either. I'll throw him in with the Pickens and Higgins discussion. So you want to go Dell next over Jordan Addison?
Yes.
I think Jordan Addison, is it the quarterback indecision for you that's the issue?
I think there's more of a chance that JJ McCarthy is bad than he's good. And again, you could like JJ McCarthy. I like him too, but just one of these guys has to bust, right? They can't all be good. It's like, so I'll bet on, and again, bust doesn't mean like he's terrible, like how Bryce Young was his rookie year. It just means that he's like quarterback 27, right? He's like 16 picks, 8 touchdowns and 12 picks, something like that, where you see things. So and that could crush Addison's value. It's not going to hurt Justin Jefferson.
So right now it's Addison, Rice, George Pickens, and then the 3 not not old guys, but older, DK, Debo, and T. Higgins. I think that George Pickens is a guy that we can both get excited about. So let's go
Pickens and Rice would be the next two.
Okay, so Rashee Rice, if there was nothing hanging over his head, I think we would have had him right after Devonta Smith, right?
You think his career is over? I mean, let's say
not. Well, I will say I'm buying Rashee Rice. You know, I talked about it on the Sonic Truth, but I will say the one thing that this does to Rashee Rice that not enough people are talking about is, and you'll say that there's still plenty of mouths to feed in Kansas City, but I think it makes Kansas City more likely to use that first round pick on a wide receiver than if Rashee Rice didn't have the off-field issue. So I think it's just more of is the player that they draft this year in the first round going to be better than their second round pick, Rashee Rice, last year? And I know that shouldn't mean anything, but I do believe in this wide receiver class. And there's a chance one of these guys just steps in and absolutely crushes it. And a year from now, we're saying Rashee Rice is the second most valuable wide receiver on his offense. And before people say, Theo, that's not going to happen, Rashee Rice is tremendous. Last year at this time, Alan, we said the same thing about Christian Watson, where they took Jaden Reed in the second round. Christian Watson had a massive amount more dynasty value. Right now, Jaden Reed is going higher in startups. He's worth more on the trade market. It's not even close. So
the other piece of it is that Travis Kelce, man, he's going to retire eventually, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would bet on just this one more year and that's it. I mean, 35, he's heading into his age 36 season. So that also maybe, is it neutralizes them taking a first round wide receiver, because if Kelce goes, I mean, that's like the number one option on this team vaporized. So even if they take Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas, or they trade up and get, one of the, let's say Kansas City trades up and gets one of the Rome Odunze, right? Just, wish casting there a little bit. It doesn't matter. Rashee Rice will still maintain. I mean, we're talking about wide receiver 20 at this point. Not like we're arguing at the top. Wide receiver 20 is not that different than wide receiver 16 or 23.
So right now we need to rank two more guys, and the people that I have in consideration are Jordan Addison, Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf, and T. Higgins. Is there anyone else that you want to throw into JSN? Let's put him back in there.
Yeah. I would. It's clear for me that the two that popped out are the two boring guys, T. Higgins and DK Metcalf. Just they've already proven that you can get first round picks for both of them, right? So you can cash out of them if you needed to.
Well, hold on one second. I think we're seeing the trade market for Jordan Addison a little different. Like Jordan Addison, Alan, last year was the guy that a player profiler we had as the 104 in single QB leagues, and Jordan Addison went out and had an exceptional rookie season. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a guy who's 22 years old right now, and what did he finish last year? He finishes as wide receiver 30, averages 13 points per game. But Alan, he was able to find the end zone 10 times. He showed immense big play ability. Like Jordan Addison, to me, I think has to be in the top 24. If somebody told me that I could get T. Higgins or Jordan Addison, I'm taking Jordan Addison because I think he flashed so young. Are you not there?
I like Jordan Addison, but there's one thing. You take all those stats, take everything that happened with Jordan Addison, and we're about to play a different game with him. Kirk Cousins isn't there anymore, right? And Kirk Cousins is good for the fantasy production of the wide receivers. Enter in J.J. McCarthy. Again, Sam Darnold, anyone else. If these guys are average or not good, that is catastrophic to Jordan Addison. Usually superior elite alphas like Justin Jefferson, they're going to get theirs no matter what. But when you're talking about this range of player right here, a very good player, I mean, it's catastrophic.
Okay, so let's go ahead and let's go with T. Higgins and DK Metcalf. And that's going to box out Deebo Samuel. And Deebo Samuel, is it for you? It's the injuries and the age combination?
Yeah, I mean, he has an elevated injury risk because of the running usage.
So, okay, I'm okay with that. And then that also means we're not going to be ranking JSN.
Yeah, JSN. I mean, until he's one of those guys where I need to see it before I believe it. I'll pay the market price once he does it rather than buy low and then be stuck with a rotten piece of fruit.
So let's get a little T. Higgins ranked here. And then let's go ahead and rank Metcalf.
And by the way, just going back to your Addison point, you made so many good points there. It's just that there's more uncertainty with Addison now than I think with Higgins or DK Metcalf.
Who is the player that's not ranked here that's going to burn us if we look back at this 6 months and now and we say that's actually comical we didn't consider this person? I'll just throw out Brian Thomas Jr.
Great call.
Because he's the rookie where there's some people don't love him. They say this is a guy that had, I know, I watched our friends over at Fantasy Points. It was Brett Whitefield and Scott Barrett discussing this, and Scott was had some red flags with Brian Thomas, and this was Brett Whitefield's wide receiver 4 in the class. But I think fundamentally, even though we're poking a few flaws here and there, and maybe his route tree is not as developed, you're still talking about this 6'3", 210-pound, incredible athlete who runs in the low 4.3s and had 17 touchdown receptions in the SEC last year. There's also a chance, Alan, that I think he's more likely the top 12 pick than the 20th pick because somebody just trades up to get him, and maybe somebody trades back with Minnesota and ends up taking him at 11. So I've seen Arizona, if they trade back, taking Brian Thomas and just putting him in the role that you want Rome Odunze in. I think Brian Thomas is the guy that could burn us a year from now.
That's such a good call right there. But there's no reason to force him in there because a lot of things have to happen like that. Now, if that happens, we're going to, Player Profiler is going to redo their rankings and he's going to be there. So I would say that at this point in time, if I was to pick the one guy, it's got to be a rookie, right? Because we don't usually see the rookie coming. It's going to be Xavier Worthy, right? I mean, just there's so much upside there if he lands in the right spot. I mean, remember, again, I use Will Fuller often because nobody loved Will Fuller, but he was a guy who got 40 points a week and just won the week for you. Xavier Worthy strikes me as a combination of that type of game flipping speed, along with, a Tank Dell-esque because of the size. You don't see him coming. So he would be the guy that I'll probably regret not putting on our top 24 and being like, oh my God, I can't believe I have DK Metcalf up there.
And I also think that Worthy is a guy that we've talked about this on Sonic Truth. There's going to be certain NFL teams that look at him and say, this guy could be a speed slot for us, and we're going to use him like Jalen Waddle was as a rookie. And the targets are much higher than you think. And he has the big playability, but he also has that floor of just receiving targets and being a guy you can bet on weekly. So I'm with you. I do think if we get burned, it's going to be a rookie. JSN could also burn us. Deebo Samuel could burn us because he could put up a massive season. And then there's always a chance an old guy goes nuts. Devontae Adams could see the Cooper Kupps, Devontae Adams, and, average 20 plus points per game. And we look bad on that. But let's give one quick recap. 24 names. We were able to get through it. We went 10 minutes over our how long I thought we'd be airing, but every time I'm with Alan, we talk long because it's so much fun and we get so much accomplished.
We're a bunch of yentas.
That's right. Have great use of the word yenta. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Marvin Harrison Jr., Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson, AJ Brown, Malik Neighbors, Tyreek Hill, that gets us through wide receiver 10, Rome Odunze, Drake London, Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk, Devonta Smith, Nico Collins, Zay Flowers, Tank Dell, George Pickens, Rashee Rice, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf. If you don't like somebody that we ranked, let us know in the comments if there's somebody that you're really fired up about, or if there's somebody that you think that Alan and I are underrating too much. Let us like and subscribe. Alan, let everybody know what you have coming up.
Yeah, I mean, the over on the RotoWire YouTube page, all the stuff I do with you guys, everybody knows about that. You do a great job promoting it, but we're going to be doing a 2-day draft marathon with 50 experts, including yourself, Theo. So Jim Coventry, one of our hosts over at RotoWire on the RotoWire YouTube page, the Monday and Tuesday of the draft, a 6-hour-a-day marathon where we're going to have 50 NFL experts. And then, of course, during the first round of the draft, we'll be on the air. Same time you guys are, we'll be flipping back and forth with the draft coverage. So 50 experts in 2 days, RotoWire YouTube page.
Yeah, I got to make sure I sign up for a good hour, Alan. That's a lot of fun. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I love chopping up. Highly recommend Alan's work. Highly recommend Jim Coventry's work. You guys do such a great job. Stick with us here at Dynasty Life. We got you covered. And look for Alan and I later this week on the Sonic Truth podcast. It's going to be a lot of fun. less than 3 weeks, Alan. It's coming. NFL draft is coming.